Over the last couple of weeks, there's been some interesting tidbits that have come out of the Final Fantasy VII Remake Ultimania book, particularly quotes from game director Tetsuya Nomura and producer Yoshinori Kitase. So in this video, I'll be diving into those quotes, trying to figure out how big Part 2 will be, and go into deep detail with what I think will happen at each location in Part 2 of Final Fantasy VII Remake. So settle in, this is going to be a long one. Let's get started. What's going on? My name is Taylor and welcome to the Gaming Shelf. If you enjoy JRPGs and want to stay up to date with the latest news, reviews, and other fun videos just like this, then make sure you subscribe so you don't miss anything. So as I said, there have been some interesting tidbits that have been coming out of the Final Fantasy VII Remake Ultimania book. In particular, a few quotes about Part 2 of the Final Fantasy VII Remake project, so let's jump into that first. Director Tetsuya Nomura had this to say: "It depends on how many parts the overall story will be. If we divide the story into large parts, it'll take longer to make. If we divide it into more detailed, smaller sections, then developing it will be faster. I hope to release the next one as soon as possible." So kind of reading between the lines there, it seems like Tetsuya Nomura is not keen on making two giant parts that'll be super detailed that might take too long. He wants to get the next one out as soon as possible, and a lot of people are thinking, oh, maybe this will be a trilogy, maybe there'll only be 2 more games, but it sounds like from what he's saying, he wants to get more games out quickly, and there will be probably more than 3 in total, but again, it remains to be seen. And producer Yoshinori Kitase had this to say: "We're not drastically changing the story and making it into something completely different than the original. Even though it's a remake, please assume the story of Final Fantasy VII will continue as Final Fantasy VII always has." So one, I think that should quell some concerns from people that are thinking, oh, this is going to be totally different than the original, they're going to go way off the rails. It sounds like it's going to be pretty similar. And also I think that's some hints on where it could go in the future as far as what locations, what we can expect from those locations, and things like that. So with those quotes in mind, I want to go into deep detail with what's going to happen in each location in Part 2 and where I think Part 2 will stop. So my thought is, I think Part 2 is going to stop at Nibelheim when you go back there after you go to Cosmo Canyon. And how did I come to that conclusion? Well, I basically went through each location leading up to Nibelheim, and I assigned it a set of hours depending on what I think is going to happen there, and then I tallied it up to an hour count that is similar to Part 1. So what I'm going to do now is go through each location in detail, how long I think you're going to spend there, and exactly what is going to happen. Now before I dive in, I want to give a spoiler warning. I probably am going to spoil a few things from Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1, so if you haven't played it, be warned. So like I said in my first predictions video, I think that you will begin the game in Calm, and I think that is going to take probably around 5 hours in total to finish. There's a lot of information that wasn't explained in Part 1, like some backstory to Sephiroth, who he is, maybe even some backstory on Zack, some backstory between Tifa and Cloud and their childhood. I think there's going to be a lot that they're going to dive into in Calm in that flashback sequence, and I think you're going to play a lot of it. Now, the original Calm section is pretty long. I want to say it's at least an hour or so. It's just this big exposition dump. So I think this will be equally as long, and I think you're going to play a lot of those flashback sections. So after you complete Calm, after you spend some time there, after you raid people's houses and steal their items, I think you will then go to the Chocobo farm, obviously. And I don't think this is going to be a quick little side excursion. I think we're going to spend at least an hour there. And the reason I say that is because I don't think they're just going to be like, here's some greens, here's some Chocobo lore materia, be on your merry way. You have to think about this from a developer standpoint. Anytime you create a zone, some kind of area in a game, you want your player to be there as long as possible without them getting bored or without it being overkill. So I think at the Chocobo farm, they're going to send you on a quest to maybe rescue some Chocobos, maybe go find some items in the world, and that way they'll reward you with a Chocobo that way instead of exactly like it was in the original. So just like in Part 1, there were some areas that were little side quest hubs. I think the Chocobo farm will be a small side quest hub, not big. I think you might have 2 or 3 side quests before you carry on your journey and head to the Mithril Cave. And speaking of the Mithril Cave, I think that will also be greatly expanded. In the original, it was probably only about 15 minutes or so, but I think this will take at least an hour to go through. Think about the journey between sectors in Part 1, those big long tunnels, you're fighting a lot of enemies. I think the Mithril Cave will be that. There'll be a lot of monsters, it'll be pretty long, and there will be a boss waiting for you at the end, and I think it might even be a Turk fight. And the reason I say that, it got me thinking of Part 1. Elena was not even in Part 1, one of the Turks, and so she shows up in the Mithril Cave in the original Final Fantasy VII game, and so I think this might be an opportunity for another Turk fight. Maybe this is where Elena shows up and she's part of the fight. So I just think because they're trying to expand on things, Mithril Cave will be a little bit longer and there'll be a boss waiting for you at the end. Now, in the original Final Fantasy VII, the next big hub or the next big area was Junyuan Harbor, and there were a couple side activities along the way. First and foremost was finding Yuffie and adding her to your party. Now, I think in the remake, it's not going to be a simple, like, let's find her, fight her, and move on. I think there might be a small little story segment, because for how much work they're going to put into her being a playable character, I don't think they're going to make her optional. They're going to make her a core story party member that you will get, and I think there will be something like, maybe you find her as she stole some materia, or you have to rescue her or something, but I think she will be a story moment and it won't be quick. I think it'll be between 30 minutes to an hour. Now after that, there is Fort Condor. That is totally optional in the original game, and I think they're gonna totally either cut Fort Condor or move it to a different part of the world. I think for what they're trying to do with the story going forward, I think Fort Condor is too much of a distraction that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I think that will be completely removed in part 2, and then maybe in a future game, you'll come back to it. So Junyuan Harbor, this is an interesting location because in the original, it's really weird. It's like the remnants of a town that Shinra built this base on top of. And then of course, there's the moment with Priscilla where you have to resuscitate her. There's the part where you have to ride the dolphin up to the top. That was some weird, goofy stuff. And of course, 7 Remake Part 1 did get goofy, but I don't know if it will get that goofy. I do think that you will infiltrate Shinra at Junyuan Harbor. I just think it'll play out a little bit differently. I do think Cloud will sneak in. He'll get in the uniform. And I think the parade where you march to the different movements and you have the little moves you perform, I think that'll be much more expanded and there'll be much more to do there. And I think maybe even your training section where the guy is teaching you all the different moves, I think that will be expanded. And this will be a great opportunity to learn more about Heidegger and Rufus, because Rufus is kind of just thrown in at the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1. So I think this will be a great opportunity to learn more about what Shinra's trying to do, what they're doing with Neo Midgar, and just as they're chasing Sephiroth along with you, I just think this will be a good opportunity to do that. And I think Junyuan Harbor will probably be around 1 to 2 hours. Next, we hop on the cargo ship and cross the ocean, and I think this will probably be about an hour. Again, you'll learn a little bit more about Shinra, a little bit more about your party members, and then you have that fight with Genova at the very end, and then you move on to Costa del Sol. Now, I'm not totally sure what they could possibly expand in the cargo ship, but I just think, like they did in Part 1, they're trying to expand everything, so I think it'll be at least an hour. Now, Costa del Sol, again, is kind of an interesting area because in the original Final Fantasy VII, when you go there for the first time, you don't really do much. You get off, maybe you buy some weapons, and then you leave. There's really nothing to do there. So I think, again, like the Chocobo farm, I think they're not going to want to create this zone and not have you do anything there. I think this honestly might be an opportunity for some fan service. I think they might have a beach day or something, just a day where they like, oh, let's just rest. Let's take a day to rest and relax. And maybe there's a few other side quests. I think this might also be a small side quest hub. Maybe you work at the bar or something like that, or maybe Tifa works at the bar. Actually, I think, wow, I just thought of that right now, and I think that's a brilliant idea that they could do in Part 2. And again, I think you're probably going to spend about an hour at Costa del Sol. So before I move on, I just wanted to let you know that over 90% of people that have been watching my videos are not subscribed to my channel. So if you're one of those people and you're enjoying the video, then please consider subscribing. Next, we make our way through Mount Corel, and I don't know if there's really any big story opportunities here, but I just remember when I played the original version that was a long section, so I think that'll probably be at least 2 hours. Maybe there'll be some opportunities to like rest and look at the sunrise or just look at the world around you, and so just some time to admire and stop and rest and think about the journey that we've been going on. But there really isn't a whole lot story-wise that happens as you're making your way through Corel into the Gold Saucer. But of course, after Corel is the Gold Saucer, and like I said in my previous video, I think the Gold Saucer will be absolutely massive, and I think they're really going to expand this section of the Gold Saucer. Now, as a reminder, this is not the time you go on the date. That'll be much later. At a different time, you come back to the Gold Saucer, but this is where you meet Cait Sith for the first time. This is where you get the opportunity to explore the Gold Saucer. So I think there will be a lot more that you can do there, and I think you're probably going to spend at least 3 to 5 hours there. After this, we have the Corel prison, and you spend more time in the town of Corel, and this is, of course, where we meet Dyne. And I think this will be a great opportunity to learn more about Barrett and his backstory and what happened with Dyne and what happened with his hometown. So I think Corel will probably be at least 2 hours. I don't think it'll just simply be, let's show up, let's fight Dyne, and let's get out of here. I think there will probably be some more time you spend with Dyne, some more backstory. We get to learn about him, Marlene, and Barrett growing up. And again, I don't think it'll be as wacky like it was in the original where those guys are just chasing you. There's like holes that don't go anywhere. I think it'll be a little bit more straightforward. Now, this next part, I'm not totally sure how they're going to handle, but after the Gold Saucer, you'll remember that Dio gives you a buggy so you can cross the river and traverse different parts of the world. I'm not totally sure if Part 2 is going to be open world or not, or if it's going to be something like Final Fantasy XII and Dragon Quest XI, where it's sort of this wide linear interconnected zone type of thing. So I don't know if they're going to give you the buggy or not, or if you get the buggy, then maybe those wide linear zones will be designed for the buggy, so it makes more sense, but I'm just totally not sure how they're going to handle that just yet. But the next area on the trip is Gungaga, and like I said in my last video, I think it will be greatly expanded. You're going to learn more about Zack, you're going to learn more about his family, learn more about what happened there. And if you haven't watched that video, go check out that video after this one. It explains a little bit more what I think is going to happen with Gungaga.
Me? Gungaga. Hey, what's so funny about that? You know Gungaga?
And after that is Cosmo Canyon, and the more I thought about it, the more I felt like Cosmo Canyon might be the biggest area in this part too. Now I know I said Gold Saucer will be, but I just thought about like, how big are the towns in the world of Final Fantasy VII, and what do you actually do there? And I thought Cosmo Canyon is actually really big. Like outside of Midgar and the Gold Saucer, Cosmo Canyon is probably the biggest town in the entire world. I mean, it's really tall, there's lots of shops, there's lots of little places to hang out and talk to people, and of course there's the observatory on top with Bugenhagen. So I just think there'll be a lot of time to reflect and talk about the planet, what's happening with the planet. And as you might remember from the original, they have this little campfire scene where Barrett reflects on starting Avalanche and all these different things. So I think there will be time to reflect, and there will be some interesting story moments that happen there. And I think we will really learn about the world at Cosmo Canyon. I just really think it's going to be big. And then last but not least, we are going to end this next part in Nibelheim. And the reason I say that is because after I started adding up all these hours, if you do Nibelheim and then right after is Rocket Town, it doesn't really make sense to end the game at Rocket Town. That doesn't seem like a really smart place to stop the game. And I just think that's too many more story beats and towns to create for a full game. And so I think something a little different is going to happen in Nibelheim. Obviously, we're going to go there and we're going to realize, oh my God, it didn't burn. There's the Shinra Mansion, which is really optional. And that's also where you get Vincent in the original game. So I think there's going to be a lot that happens there. Like you're maybe going to want to visit your old houses. You're going to want to explore the Shinra Mansion. There is the reactor where all the experiments are happening. So I think this might be one of the biggest areas that get changed from the original. And I've been watching a lot of other prediction videos, and people are saying like, well, who could possibly be the final boss fight? Because you can't just do Sephiroth over and over and over again. And I don't know the answer to that. I really don't know. I wonder if maybe Vincent is a boss. That would be kind of interesting. Maybe it's an entirely new enemy that we haven't thought of. Maybe it's the Advent Children guys like Laz and Kadaj, like those guys. I'm totally not sure, but again, I don't think they can just keep throwing Sephiroth as the final boss fight every single time. It's gonna get tired, it's gonna get old. So I'm really not sure, but I just think Nibelheim would be a great place to end because of its significance in the overall story. I think it's just a great opportunity to expand on the original game. Now, one other thing that I didn't mention to keep in mind as I'm talking about all these areas is travel time, like how long it takes to go from one town to the next, one area to the next. So if you include travel time, which I'm going to say is 3 to 5 hours, all these hours combined for all these different towns, I came up with about 30 hours, and that was on the low end, assuming you're not doing all the side quests, assuming you're not grinding, assuming there's not new areas and there's not new things to do. So again, the original was about 30-ish hours, and so in my head, I came up with this amount, and this was also about 30-ish hours. So again, that makes sense to me. It is not where Disc 2 stopped in the original, and it is really not where a lot of people are thinking it's gonna stop, which is the City of the Ancients or the Temple of the Ancients. But just trying to add up the hours and all the different towns and different areas they would have to make, to me, this just made the most sense. So with that being said, I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Do you think it'll end at Nibelheim? Do you think it'll be much further? Do you think it'll just all be one more game? I'm very curious to hear what you think. Now, if you want to hear even more Final Fantasy VII content, check out this playlist. I've been doing a lot of Final Fantasy VII Remake content going back to when it was announced, my reaction. I've done a spoiler cast with my friends at the Giant Sword podcast, so check that playlist out. There's tons of great videos in case you missed any. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.